going to go. Welcome to the Infant Meal Pattern Requirements Training. The training was developed by the Institute of Child Nutrition and has been adjusted slightly to meet state of Maine requirements. My name is Cindy Chase, and I work as a CACFP contract specialist with the Maine Office of Child Nutrition. Since 1968, the CACFP has helped to ensure participants receive nutritious meals and snacks while attending childcare. Over the years, however, the nutritional needs and the eating habits of children have shifted. In particular, the overall health status of this country has shifted from deficiencies in essential nutrients, such as a lack of vitamins A and C, to chronic diseases such as hypertension, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and even some forms of cancer. In 2010, Congress called for the USDA Food and Nutrition Services to review and revise the CACFP meal pattern requirements. Sorry, technical difficulties. What's going on? I couldn't see your screen. Ah. I was told you couldn't see my screen. So sorry. In 2010, Congress called for the USDA Food and Nutrition Services to review and revise the CACFP meal pattern requirements to address the current health status of children and adults and to better align with the dietary guidelines for Americans. Since the dietary guidelines did not provide recommendations for infants, they used the scientific recommendations from the National Academy of Medicine, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and stakeholder input to update the infant meal pattern. In April 2016, they released these updated guidelines in the Child and Adult Care Food Program meal pattern revisions related to the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act of 2010 final rule, and they went into effect in October. Ultimately, the updated meal pattern requirements are expected to enhance the overall nutritional quality of meals and snacks served in CACFP settings. And now I can't move my screen again. Hold on. There we go. There are three major updates in the infant meal pattern. First, they encourage and support breastfeeding by providing reimbursement when mothers breastfeed on site. Second, they promote developmentally appropriate meals by separating the infant age groups into 2 age groups instead of 3. Third, they provide meals that are more nutritious to promote the development of healthy eating habits by requiring vegetables and fruits to be served at snack, by disallowing juice, cheese food, and cheese spreads as creditable items, and by allowing yogurt and whole eggs to credit as meat alternates. Another great point worth mentioning is that many of the updates expand on the requirements implemented in the past, and this may make it easier to connect those previously implemented with the updated requirements. Therefore, in today's training, we will highlight some of the previously implemented policies to show the connection between the two, but spend the majority of our time exploring those requirements that went into effect on October 1st in 2017. Let's begin by exploring the meal pattern charts. There are a few key changes to the infant meal pattern. Let's review some of those changes. First, the previous meal pattern featured 3 age groups, birth through 3 months, 4 through 6 months, and 7 through 12 months. However, now there are only 2, birth through the end of 5 months and 6 months through the end of 11 months. There are 3 basic advantages to having 2 infant age groups. 2 age groups is consistent with the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations. It aligns with WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children program, and it's more simplistic because of having 2 groups rather than 3. The next change to the charts focuses on the age group, birth through the end of 5 months. Previously, breast milk and infant formula was the only required component for the first 3 months. However, breast milk is the optimal source of nutrients for infants, and it's generally the only source of nutrients that infants need for healthy growth and development during the first 6 months of life. Particularly, breast milk provides the right balance of proteins, healthy fats, vitamins, and other essential nutrients. It also helps to protect infants against illnesses and chronic diseases such as obesity, asthma, and type 2 diabetes. What's more, breastfeeding can have a positive effect on their emotional and physical well-being. Therefore, the only required food component for infants between the ages of birth through the end of 5 months is a minimum of 4 to 6 fluid ounces of express breast milk or infant formula for all meals and snacks. The next update to the infant meal pattern focuses on developmental readiness. The previous infant meal pattern allowed solid foods to be introduced as early as 4 months of age. However, if infants are introduced to solid foods before they're developmentally ready, the risk of being overweight or obese later in life increases. Also, infants need time to develop the skills for eating solid foods, and most infants are not ready to consume solid foods until midway through the first year. Therefore, infants may now be introduced to solid foods when they're developmentally ready to accept them. This means that you may serve solid foods to infants before, at, or after 6 months of age. As you can see on the infant food chart, the serving sizes for all food components for meals and snacks begins with a 0. And that's for infants 6 through 11 months of age, with the exception of breast milk and infant formula. This serving size recognizes that not all infants are ready to eat solid foods at 6 months of age and may need additional time before they're developmentally ready. It's important to note, by 7 or 8 months of age, most infants should be consuming solid foods from all food groups. We'll explore this topic in detail later in the session. The previous meal pattern called for a combination of the following food components: breast milk or infant formula, infant cereal, and vegetable fruit or a combination of both. Also, meat and meat alternates were not introduced until around 8 months of age. However, the updated meal pattern requirements now allow foods from all of the food components to be served to infants around 6 months when it's developmentally appropriate. In particular, at breakfast, lunch, and supper meals, the following 3 food components must be offered to infants when infants are developmentally ready to accept them. And those are breast milk or iron-fortified infant formula, infant cereal or meat alternates or a combination, vegetables, fruits, or a combination. Please note that the only grain allowed at meals served to infants is iron-fortified infant cereal. Even if a parent requests that their infant be served ready-to-eat cereal, bread, crackers, etc., providers cannot grant that request and still claim the meal. If a grain item other than infant cereal is served with meals, the meal is not creditable because it does not meet the infant meal pattern requirements. Creditable snacks contain 3 food components: breast milk or iron-fortified formula, grains, and vegetable fruit or a combination of both. Now that we've explored the basic changes to the infant meal pattern charts, let's explore the updated requirements, as well as some requirements that remain the same for breast milk and infant formula. As previously mentioned, breast milk is generally the best source of nutrients for healthy growth and development. Due to the many benefits of breast milk, the updated requirements encourage and promote breastfeeding in 2 key ways. First, you may continue to claim infant meals for reimbursement when a parent or guardian supplies express breast milk for their infant, and you feed the infant the expressed milk. Second, effective October 1, 2017, you were able to claim reimbursement for meals when a mother breastfed her infant at the child care facility. FNS allows a 1-month transition period for infants to switch from iron-fortified formula to whole milk. Providers can utilize this transition period for infants between 12 and 13 months of age. Serving whole milk to an infant before 12 months of age requires a note from a doctor. Focusing on serving express breast milk first, there may be times when an infant does not consume the entire serving. For example, some breastfed infants consume less than the minimum serving size of breast milk for each serving. In these situations, you may offer infants less than the minimum serving size of breast milk. However, you must offer the additional express breast milk later if the infant will consume more for a reimbursable meal. Although not new, it's important to note you should always feed infants on demand and not on a strict schedule. Feed infants during a span of time consistent with their eating habits. In addition, avoid force-feeding infants, as this may cause them to consume more than they need. As previously mentioned, you may now claim reimbursement for meals when a mother breastfeeds her infant at the child care site. A great way to encourage mothers to breastfeed on site is to establish a private, comfortable, and sanitary area. Mothers may choose to breastfeed their infant in the designated area or in a different area on site. For example, a mother chooses to breastfeed in her car or in a private office because the established area is in use. This meal is still reimbursable as long as she is on site while breastfeeding. You may be wondering, how do you document when a mother breastfeeds on site, or will this update pose additional paperwork? The great news about documentation and on-site breastfeeding is there are several ways to demonstrate compliance with this update. It is not a requirement to measure and record the amount of breast milk that a mother breastfeeds her infant. You may simply write on the menu or meal count form something like infant was offered breast milk, or breastfed on site, or mother on site, however you'd like to document that. When infants are not breastfed or they need a supplement for breast milk, iron-fortified infant formula is the best alternative. Iron is an important nutrient for infants during their first year because it supports healthy brain development and growth. The infant meal pattern requirements allow an infant younger than 12 months to be served iron-fortified formula, breast milk, or a combination of both. Therefore, if a mother chooses not to breastfeed or is unable to produce enough breast milk to satisfy the infant, serve iron-fortified formula. In this case, always have a conversation with the parent or guardian regarding the program requirements to ensure that they understand and are in agreement with serving the formula. All child care programs must continue to offer a minimum of one type of iron-fortified infant formula. Also, the selected formula must be regulated by the Food and Drug Administration to be creditable in the CACFP. The great news is any formula marketed or purchased in the store in the U.S. is regulated by the FDA. So just be careful if you purchase an infant formula outside of the U.S., such as through an online store with vendors in other countries, because that may not be regulated by the FDA. In these cases, the formula may not credit in the CACFP. When serving formula, some infants may not consume the entire serving. However, as long as you offer the minimum serving size, the meal is reimbursable. This is true for any food or beverage served to all participants, infants, children, and adults in the CACFP. A participant does not need to consume the minimum serving size of a food component in order for the meal to be reimbursable. They just need to be served the minimum serving size. In situations where there are leftovers, always properly store them based on the more stringent of your local health and safety requirements or the Feeding Infants Handbook. Due to a disability, some infants may not be able to consume breast milk or iron-fortified infant formula as well as other foods outlined in the meal pattern. In these situations, you must make reasonable accommodations. There are two key policy memos that feature information on meeting the needs of infants requiring modified meals. And those are CACFP 14-2017, Modifications to Accommodate Disabilities in the Child and Adult Care Food Program and Summer Food Service Program, and CACFP 06-2017, Feeding Infants and Meal Pattern Requirements in the Child and Adult Care Food Program, Questions and Answers. The medical statement is an essential tool for serving reimbursable meals to those requiring modifications. In many cases, disabilities can be managed within the meal pattern requirements when a well-planned variety of nutritious food is available to participants. For example, an infant is allergic to apples. You could work with the parents to identify an alternative food, such as oranges. In these cases, a medical statement is not required for meal modifications that meet the meal pattern requirements. However, a medical statement is required when the accommodation calls for serving a specific food or an entire meal that does not meet the meal pattern requirements. For example, if an infant's disability requires an infant formula that is not iron fortified, a medical statement is required for reimbursement. In these situations, request a written medical statement signed by a state-recognized medical authority, such as a physician, or anyone who's authorized to write a medical prescription under state law. A medical statement should feature two key factors. It needs to show enough information about the participant's disability to allow you to understand how it affects their diet, and it needs to recommend alternate food items to ensure that you know just what you can serve to the participant. Once you receive a medical statement, review it carefully to make sure that it provides the necessary information for meeting the needs of those requiring meal modifications. If it does not, request additional information to ensure that you know how to best meet the needs of those requiring modifications. In addition, always keep all medical statements on file in your facility. Introducing solid foods is a very important step for infants, parents, and guardians. It is vital that infants are developmentally ready for solid foods before introducing them. As previously mentioned, infants will be developmentally ready to accept solid foods before, at, or after 6 months of age. By 7 or 8 months of age, most infants should consume solid foods from all food groups. However, infants develop at their own rate. This means if an 8-month-old is not developmentally ready for solid foods, the meal or snack is still reimbursable, providing that you serve the minimum serving size of 6 to 8 fluid ounces of breast milk or infant formula. It's important to consult with parents or guardians about when and what solid foods to introduce to their infants. This approach helps to ensure that all newly introduced foods are appropriate for each infant and consistent with their eating habits. There are 3 key topics you may wish to discuss with parents: the American Academy of Pediatrics Developmental Readiness Guidelines, optional written statements, and approved food components. Let's review each of these topics in detail. First, the American Academy of Pediatrics is the leading authority for children's development and nutrition needs from birth through 23 months of age. They found that there's no direct signal to determine when an infant is developmentally ready to accept solid foods. However, the AAP provides these guidelines to help determine when an infant is developmentally ready to accept solid foods. When communicating with parents and guardians about developmental readiness, you may wish to use the AAP's Developmental Readiness Guidelines. These guidelines state that an infant may be developmentally ready to accept solid foods when he or she is able to sit in a high chair, feeding seat, or infant seat with good head control, when they open their mouth when food comes their way. The infant may watch others eat, reach for food, and seem eager to be fed, when they move food from a spoon into the throat, and when they double in weight. Next, there's the optional written statement for infant meals. The updated requirements recommend a written statement from parents or guardians outlining when and which solid foods to serve to their infant. Although not a requirement, this optional statement will help you to know what to do to meet the needs of the infants and follow the preferences of the parents and guardians. Previously, a parent or guardian could provide all but one component and the meal would be reimbursable. However, the updated requirements allow parents and guardians to provide only one food component for a reimbursable infant meal. As the operator, you must provide the remaining components for meals and snacks. To meet this requirement, the single item must be creditable and in the minimum serving size. For example, if a mother provides green beans in the minimum serving size on the days when black beans are served at lunch, the green beans will credit toward a reimbursable meal. On the other hand, the meal or snack is not reimbursable if a parent or guardian chooses to provide 2 or more components, less than the minimum serving sizes, or a non-creditable food item. Once an infant is developmentally ready to accept solid foods and you have communicated with the parents, you must offer the food to the infant. Begin by gradually introducing solid foods one at a time and over the course of a few days. It may be appropriate to offer solid food at only 1 meal per day when an infant is just starting to eat them. Also, it's not necessary to offer an infant a solid food component at every meal or snack, such as vegetable and fruit, until the infant has established a tolerance for that food component. As previously mentioned, the meal is reimbursable as long as it's consistent with the eating habits of the infant. Most centers that accept infants have separate infant rooms and staff members dedicated to infant care. If infants remain in the infant room beyond 12 months of age, it's important that staff members are trained to understand that those infants must follow the meal pattern for children between the ages of 1 and 2 years old. In addition to gradual introduction, here are a few other measures for ensuring infants have the best experience when consuming solid foods. Prepare foods in the right texture and consistency appropriate for the age and development of each infant. And observe each infant closely for reactions after feeding a new food. If there's a reaction, stop feeding the food and discuss this with the parents or guardians. Consult with parents or guardians who should contact their baby's doctor before introducing that food in the future. For additional ways to introduce solid foods to infants, refer to the Feeding Infants, a Guide for Use in the Child Nutrition Program's handbook. This handbook was recently emailed to everyone, and it was because it was just updated by FNS, so we have sent that out to all of you. Now that we've discussed developmental readiness, let's shift our focus to the updated requirements on adding more nutritious options to infant meals and snacks. As previously mentioned, there are 4 updates for serving more nutritious foods to infants. Serve a vegetable or fruit at snack. Juice, cheese food, and cheese spreads are not creditable items in the infant meal pattern. Yogurt and whole eggs credit as meat alternates. And deep fat frying is not allowed when preparing meals or snacks on site. Let's review each of these updates and some key strategies for implementation. The first update focuses on the vegetable and fruit component. Vegetables and fruits are great sources of essential nutrients such as fiber and vitamin C. Currently, vegetables and fruits are required at breakfast, lunch, and supper meals for infants who are developmentally ready to accept them, around 6 months of age. In the updated meal pattern requirements, 0 to 2 tablespoons of vegetables, fruits, or a combination of both must be offered during snacks when infants are developmentally ready to accept them. This change promotes vegetable and fruit consumption in infants, and it allows for better acceptance later in life. Juice lacks the dietary fiber found in other forms of fruits and vegetables. When infants drink too much juice, they're more likely to experience diarrhea, abdominal pain, and other gastrointestinal problems. Therefore, juice is no longer creditable as part of a reimbursable infant meal or snack. For additional information on the vegetable and fruit component, refer to the policy memos CACFP 06-2017, Feeding Infants and Meal Pattern Requirements in the Child and Adult Care Food Program, Questions and Answers, or CACFP 09-2017, Vegetable and Fruit Requirements in CACFP, Questions and Answers for the current policies. The next update focuses on the meat alternate component. Some common examples of meat alternates include meats, yogurt, cheese, whole eggs, and dry beans. The specific updates to this component focus on yogurt, whole eggs, and cheese foods and spreads. Let's begin by exploring yogurt. Yogurt is a great source of protein, and this macronutrient provides energy, builds and maintains muscle, and promotes a healthy metabolism. Because of the benefits of protein and the popularity of yogurt, it now credits as a meat alternate for infants when they're developmentally ready to accept it. When serving yogurt, serve 0 to 4 ounces during breakfast, lunch, or supper meals. Although a great source of protein, some yogurts have significantly more sugar than others. Exposing infants to high amounts of sugar early on can have a negative influence on eating habits. As a result, the updated requirements now limit the amount of sugar creditable yogurts may contain to promote healthy habits from the start. Moreover, yogurt must contain no more than 23 grams of sugar per 6-ounce serving to credit as part of a reimbursable meal. Eggs are a great source of protein. Previously, there was a concern that the protein in egg whites could cause an allergic reaction. However, the AAP concluded that there's no convincing evidence to delay the introduction of foods that are considered major food allergens, such as eggs. Therefore, the updated infant meal pattern requirements allow 0 to 4 tablespoons of whole eggs to credit toward a reimbursable meal. It's important to note that when serving eggs, you must serve the whole egg. Serving only egg yolks or only egg whites is no longer creditable in CACFP. Next, 0 to 2 ounces of cheese and cottage cheese credits as a meat alternate. Some common examples of cheese may include shredded or sliced Swiss Colby and Monterey Jack. However, certain cheese items have significantly higher amounts of sodium than others. Eating too many foods high in sodium can lead to heart disease, stroke, and hypertension. Therefore, the updated infant meal pattern requirements disallow the service of cheese foods or cheese spreads for infant meals. It's important to note that cheese foods are still allowable for children and adults. Non-creditable items may be identified by reading the product's packaging for the wording imitation cheese, cheese food, or cheese product on the food label, such as cheese whips, cheese with pimento, and cream cheese. Refer to the USDA Food Buying Guide for Child Nutrition Programs to help you identify approved cheese items. The next food component for infants is grains. During the first year, grains such as iron-fortified infant cereals can be a great source of essential nutrients such as B vitamins, zinc, and magnesium. When infants are developmentally ready, serve 0 to 4 tablespoons of iron-fortified infant cereal for a reimbursable meal. The infant food chart allows for a choice of grain or meat alternate for meals. If a grain is served as a creditable component at meals, the only creditable grain is iron-fortified infant cereal. The updated infant meal pattern requirements allow breads, crackers, and now ready-to-eat cereals to credit for snack meals only. Ready-to-eat cereals are often labeled breakfast cereals or just cereal. For the purpose of this lesson, we're going to call them breakfast cereals. When choosing to serve breakfast cereals at snack, the cereal must contain no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce to be reimbursable and must be enriched, fortified, or whole grain rich. The term whole grain rich is also an update to the meal pattern. These foods are 100% whole grains or at least 50% whole grain and the remaining grains are enriched. The child and adult meal patterns feature a whole grain rich requirement. However, it does not apply to infant meals or snacks. This means that infant meals do not require a whole grain rich item. Similar to yogurt, there is more than one way to determine if a cereal meets the sugar requirements of no more than 6 grams total per dry ounce. You can use the WIC-approved breakfast cereals list because everything that credits in WIC also has that 6 grams of sugar or less per dry ounce requirement. Or you can use the table method, which we have given to everyone to tell you how to determine that yourself. Each of these methods are valid ways of determining if a cereal meets the sugar limit. If the cereal falls within the sugar limit using at least one of these methods, it's considered to be within the sugar limit and may be creditable. The first method calls for you to use the state agency's Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, or WIC, approved breakfast cereal list. All WIC-approved cereals must contain no more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce. Therefore, if you choose a breakfast cereal from any approved WIC list, it will meet the sugar limit requirements. And I specify any because some people think that that varies from state to state. It truly doesn't, but you can check any WIC cereal list. However, it's important to note that WIC-approved yogurt does not meet the sugar requirements. Therefore, you should not use that as a source for finding creditable yogurt items. The last update we will explore today is deep fat frying, in which the food is cooked by submerging in hot oil or other fat. The updated meal pattern requirements no longer allow deep fat frying as a way of cooking foods on site or at central satellite kitchens where food is prepared and then delivered to the site. This requirement applies to all CACFP age groups, including infants. Foods that are pre-fried, flash-fried, par-fried, or deep fat fried by a commercial manufacturer may be purchased and served as part of a reimbursable meal. These pre-fried items must be reheated by a method other than deep fat frying. Serving infants any type of deep fat fried food is strongly discouraged. These foods are often high in calories and solid fat, and eating too many fried foods can negatively influence eating habits and increase the risk of chronic illnesses later in life. Therefore, it's a good practice to always consider the nutritional value of a food and how it contributes to the development of healthy eating habits when planning meals and snacks for infants. Likewise, serving infants nutritious foods, as opposed to those high in fat, sugar, and calories, will help to establish the foundation for developing habits that can last a lifetime. In this training, we covered the updated meal pattern requirements for infant meals and snacks. Specifically, we explored the 2 age groups and how they promote breastfeeding by providing reimbursement when a mother breastfeeds her infant on site. The key requirements for serving expressed milk and infant formula, the importance of developmental readiness, and how the updated requirements provide more nutritious foods for infants. And I emailed this particular daily infant portion menu out to everyone so that you could see how you can track more than one infant on one sheet. I actually borrowed this from someone, asked their permission to use it because I saw it at their site when we did a review. And we'll talk about it in a minute. Completing the infant portion menu has been a struggle for many institutions because the menu must specify the food that each infant is served. Since infants consume foods when they're developmentally ready to do so, every infant at a site may be eating something different. The daily portion menu shown in this slide allows providers to enter the specific meal and snack items served to 8 different infants. First, fill in the name of the center, the day to which the menu applies, and the week ending date, which are all located at the top of the menu. Next, fill in the name of each infant, the age of each infant, and the group of each infant. The group will be either A or B, depending upon the age of the infant. Then fill in the food items consumed by each infant. Be sure to include the fluid ounces of formula or breast milk that is served to each infant for every meal and snack. Please also include a note when an infant is breastfed on site. The last 3 lines of the form should be used for edit checks. The person checking the menu for compliance should place a check in the breakfast, lunch, and snack boxes below the meals served to each infant once they have reviewed the meals and determined that the meals and snacks are creditable. Any meal or snack that does not comply with the meal pattern is not creditable. No check should be placed in a box that relates to non-creditable meals or snacks. Lastly, the number of checks listed in the breakfast line should be totaled and written beside of breakfast in the totals column. The same procedure would be used to total the number of lunches and snacks. The daily sheets should be added together each week and the totals entered on a spreadsheet or some other tally sheet of your choice. The weekly totals should be added together and entered on a tally sheet for the monthly claim for reimbursement. Always have one person complete the meal counts and a second person double check them for accuracy. Institutions may create their own forms for tracking infant meals and snacks as long as the forms capture the required information. And remember that attendance has to be documented separately from meal counts. Thank you for listening to today's Infant Meal Pattern Requirements webinar. If you have any questions regarding the webinar, please email me at cindy.chase@maine.gov.